So yeah, I mean, most objects make some kind of noise, like a bowl. It's sort of a combination of two kinds of sound, really. You've got the percussive sound, the hit, and then the ringing afterwards is a form of oscillation. Well, it's a whole range of oscillations in one object. So you can kind of, by recording it quite simply, probably pull out one or both of those properties and use them as a basis for a sound, whether it's a percussive rhythmic sound to program up as a drum hit, or whether you use it as, oh, that's a nice one, or is it an oscillation that you can kind of pull out from the decaying of the sound to then use as washes to put through reverbs, or to layer up and make some kind of almost chordal sounds, or sort of something that's more tuned, perhaps. The interaction of two different materials will kind of dictate the sound you get. So if you hit this with a hand, that's one kind of sound, terrible. Or with a wooden stick, it's going to producing a slightly different sound. Or if you wrap a wooden stick in something soft, like this amazing pink material, you get less of the kind of high frequency transient of the attack, and more of the ringing, and a kind of nice dull thud on the beginning. So you can use any range of objects you can lay your hands on that make some kind of noise, whether you hit them or rub them or however you choose to interact with them. I mean, anything from like an object like just a cardboard box that makes kind of nice sort of drummy sort of kind of a thump and a thud. You kind of get more of a bass tone out the bottom. Or stick a mic in it. So there's actually a lot of bass going on in there, even though you might not pick it up from the outside very obviously. There's anything that kind of makes shaky effects. This is some old chump change in a milk carton. This kind of things, or even just a plastic bottle can be hit or generate tones out of, or blowing across the top. Anything. This is kind of all scratchy sounds from things like hard plastic brush like this, and it's amazing what can happen with that when you pitch it down. It gets quite threatening. Anything kind of bits of metal that can be rubbed against each other. You can, for instance, make this. You've got sort of scratching effects, even a. You get quite a bit out of just the kind of the sound of that wiping down. That's some sounds. Anything kind of jangles together. They can be manipulated. Again, using pitch and reverb effects, you can get quite a wide range of odd ringing sounds and all sorts of noise out of that kind of thing. I found a music stand, which is a nice vibrating piece of metal, as demonstrated thus. It essentially sounds terrible. But it has both a percussive effect and a potential for harmonic effect. It has a series of random harmonics generated from it being a piece of metal with holes drilled in it, attached to other bits of metal. So it can be used as a percussive sound, sort of, or it can be used again as the oscillations that kind of come through as the initial transient disappears and you're left with a ringing sound. You get a series of bell-like tones from the metal.
You're going to be recording it with two different microphones. Why use two mics?
Use two mics. Well, there's no reason to use two mics. You could use one mic. I've used two here because I was interested in getting some kind of a stereo effect, but without it being stereo in a traditional clinical sense, but as far as something that would create a sense of space or something interesting beyond the actual sounds of the object itself. The microphone on the front here is a ribbon mic, which has there's two things that are great about it. One is which it has a very strong proximity effect, so as it gets closer to an object, the low frequency balance, or the balance in the frequency response is tipped more towards the low frequency, so you can get more of the low ringing oscillation tones out of the object. The closer you move it, the more it kind of gets boomy and sounds kind of like a big, almost gong kind of effect. So you can get quite a radical degree of this proximity effect with a ribbon mic because of its polar pattern being a figure of 8. The other reason is also that because it has quite a strong roll-off in the high frequencies, the transient of this, the nasty bits of the sound there are kind of tempered quite a lot by a ribbon microphone that with a condenser would be a lot more harsh.
And that's what you've got for your second mic?
So yeah, just in case you wanted to keep all the harshness, there's a condenser at the back here, which itself, being a cardioid polar pattern condenser mic, also has a degree of a proximity effect, not quite as pronounced as the ribbon mic, but still very useful. But yeah, you can pick up a lot more of the high frequency, the kind of harmonics, and kind of balance the darker tone of the ribbon with the brighter tone of the condenser. And then actually using them as a stereo pair, left and right, you get a much more interesting, slightly tilted perspective and something that's kind of less obviously realistic and something more impressionistic, perhaps. And so I put the ribbon on the front where I'm going to be hitting it. So therefore that kind of keeps some of the nastier transient sound down, the kind of tack-tack of the stick. And then round the back and put the condenser at the back because it's brighter, then it'll have less of that sound. Because I don't really need, as you'll hear, you don't really need much of the attack sound, as it's going to be pretty present in both mics. They're also, the way I kind of got them set up was actually by putting on a pair of headphones, panning them hard left and right, and just moving them around until I found somewhere as I was hitting it, I found that I liked the effect that had. Yeah, so I have the two mics set up, one panned, that one's panned left, that one's panned right, and just getting them positioned by hitting the object. And what I was trying to do was actually get the main low frequency resonance kind of balanced a bit in the centre. So having kind of placed them somewhere generally and close enough that I can really feel the low frequency come forward because of the proximity effect. And then just going to try and move them a little bit just to get the low frequency phase relatively in phase so that I kind of feel that it's kind of centred. Currently that's panned right, and as I hit it, there's a low ringing tone that is much more apparent in my left ear, so which is this mic here. So if I just start moving this in to then balance out, to kind of it'll feel like the bass end will start to move close more into the centre as this one has more of a low frequency build up because of the resonance of because of the proximity effect. So if I that sounds more centrally balanced, or at least spread evenly from left to right. Obviously, there's some distinct differences in the tone between the two sides, so they have a very much. So hitting it with the wooden stick straight away, we're getting a lot of very hard attack from the sound, but that's going to excite more of the high frequency harmonics generated here. They're not harmonics in the sense of a standard series of harmonics as you get with a string or any kind of normal instrument. This is very much more like a drum. It's inharmonic. It's kind of potentially tuneless, or technically tuneless, but there's some interesting tones you'll be getting at, and we can start to focus on when you start processing the samples more. But one way to sort of manipulate it very early before you even start looking at the computer or how you're going to manipulate it is to then change what you hit it with. So this has got very much the hard attack and the kind of the high frequency bias. But then if you hit it with, say, a more muffled, softer beta style thing, you would get much more of the stronger low frequency and obviously less of the excited high frequencies. So we're getting more kind of a belly gongy sound if we can get away from the fact that it's going to shake around a bit. So if I hold it actually and hit it. So yeah, changing what you strike the object with, it has an enormous effect on how it behaves. Right, so I'm going to get a series of hits from the music stand here. It could be whatever it is you want to record, whether it's a rubber band or a bathtub or anything goes. But it's just getting a series of different hits, so things you can either sequence up later or layer up to create new sounds, pitch them, do whatever, process them in some fashion. So I'm going to get a few different sounds with, say, with the hard stick and then a sort of soft beta to get different tones. And each time just letting the sound ring out, so we've got as much of the sound in its different forms from the initial hard hit through to the decaying oscillations. So just set it off recording and kind of a hard stick hit. And then maybe a hit in a different place. And then maybe with the beta. And then maybe another one. Okay, so we recorded the two channels. We've got the condenser mic and the ribbon mic up, and they sound us. So one thing to do, maybe if we want to use this for, say, turning into a kind of pad sound, maybe using it, kind of sampling it up, might want to try and find a root tone, even though these are inharmonic, and none of the harmonics sort of switch into something that we could kind of instantly say, oh, that's a C and that's an F sharp. We might find that we can find a dominant ringing tone in the sound, and then use that as a pitch reference point. Sometimes using a tuner, playing it back with a tuner, it'll find you a note that it kind of filters out that you might be able to use. But in this case, it doesn't want to actually identify any note. It can't break it down. So another way to do that is to use, say, a frequency analyzer, spectrum analyzer, like this, the Voxengo Span, which is freeware, so there's no reason not to have it. And so if we play it and then maybe freeze the picture, and we stop that, and we can zoom in and have a little look at what we've got and see if there's a tone that might be dominant. We can instantly see maybe down in the lowish here we've got a relatively dominant low frequency tone at, it's just sharp of D sharp 3, so we could actually maybe make a note of that and say, okay, we maybe want to try and tune it to that. There's also a kind of a strong ringing here at C, a slightly flat C5, and you can maybe use those as starting points to just kind of try and tune it. And then just see if you map it out in a sampler, you might be able to get a nice pad sound from that. So yeah, we might find that the transient part of it is a little bit strong and kind of does make it sound like someone's just walked into a radiator or similar. So you might want to just temper that a little from being the harsh kind of tic-tac sound. You can maybe take the front down with just a little fade or something. It'll still have a kind of a semi-transient quality because obviously we've got a lot more level here before it decays out. But we can keep chopping back and chopping back, maybe to just kind of get ourselves more of a hum tone. That kind of thing. I mean, or you could even try the reverse effect. It's always quite nice. So I'm going for something a bit more of like a pad bell tone with this. I want to get rid of some of the attack. But what I want to do is start layering up the sounds and getting a bit more, a more complex overall tone. So one way to be to just go and chop out some of the other instances and assigning them to some parallel channels and just mixing them all up. So we've got the other stick hit pair here. So we'll move on to a separate pair of tracks and also just apply a similar fade. There's nothing to be exact about, just get nice and broad brush with this kind of stuff. Just snap it to the same events. And then we get, instead of it being the original tone, then just add in the second pair. And instantly we're getting something a bit richer. And then maybe we can add some more in. One of the ones that was struck with the beta for a softer, kind of deeper tone. We could take those to another pair of channels. Again, taking off the initial hit and just going for a similar size fade. Just snap them together. Again, this will be kind of crude moves with this. Just a tad quiet down there. Let's just lift up the gain on that a bit. And then maybe because they're all essentially around about the same fundamental and harmonic frequencies, give or take, because it's the same object, though it doesn't make the same sound every time. We might want to change the pitch of some of them and create something maybe more tonal, and do that maybe by shifting maybe one pair up, say a nice simple thing like a fifth, so up 7 semitones. Transpose it there, and then suddenly we get instantly this is getting something much more interesting out of it. And then maybe with the lower tones and taking them down, say another fifth down, so that's 5 semitones. So we've got something a lot thicker that we can then add further processing to make more of a complex paddy bell sound. So having made a slightly more complex sound with a couple of pitch layers, we've bounced it down to a single stereo file. And then by shipping that into a sampler, in this case, say Contact, and just sort of spread it around several octaves, then we can get a very simple kind of bell-like paddy sound. This is before we've done any real processing to it, but you end up with something a bit sort of so some kind of sort of atmospheric bell pad sound has made itself apparent from the beaten music stand. Okay, so our music stand bell pad sound has a very distinct tonality. What you could do is layer it with another sound, something more kind of straight up, and create a whole new hybrid of sound. I mean, in this, I've got one set up here, so we've got the music stand sound, which we found has a dominant F in it, so kind of tuned that accordingly, so that your C is generally around about a C on the keyboard. And then, so we've got this sound going on. Now, if you maybe put it with a simple synth sound, sort of a Then together, we get more of a abstracted. Which is an entirely different texture.